Good afternoon. My name is Kate Stanford, and we are here today to review the Board Policy Review Committee. Oh, I'm off to a great start. So I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are meeting today on the territories of the Sechelt and Squamish nations. We have an agenda before us. I'd like to adopt the agenda. Is there any additions? I have a motion and a seconder, all sorts of seconders. All those in favor? That passes. I'd like to receive reports as presented in the package. And we have a motion moved, seconded. All those in favor? And that passes. So the first section is section 4.1, board policies for review. And I just would like the corporate officer to introduce it and provide the purpose for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is actually threefold. First, it's being brought forward to review the board's policy suite in alignment with your terms of reference. In particular, we want to draw your attention to the updates that have been identified in the policy register since last year's review. And following on those updates, we have two other items for your consideration. One is considering repeal of the contacting SCRD solicitors policy per the update in the policy register. And finally, to consider approving the director email management policy with the recommended revisions. And that has been presented in attachment C of the report, which is basically the last page of the report.
Thank you. So we have our information before us. Do we have any questions? You have the opportunity to poll particular board policies if you would like to. Director McMahon.
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm in the right sequence, but I'm on attachment A. And so
Looks good.
My question is, there's a few of these that are either being held for repeal or are being held for minor revision. And does staff feel that we could get to these before the end of this term of office, since bringing in new directors and orienting them to the entire suite of policies would be a bit of a challenge. So I just wanted to ask how many of these we think we might be able to get to. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. So the highlighted sections are really the only updates that staff have provided for this term. I would interpret that to mean they have either not identified a timeline for those things being held for repeal. I would suggest that unless it's been added to the corporate work plan, we probably won't expect to see any progress made on these policies before your 2026 review.
Follow up?
Well, I meant before October of 2026, when the next local election is. So I'm just thinking if staff could get rid of as many of these ones as possible before that time, like when we meet again, presumably in June of 2026, that would be really great. And then we can, we got quite a few of them done this last time around. So it'd be nice to finish our tidying up, our housekeeping.
Staff, do you want to respond?
Just to identify that there is a high-level corporate and policy review initiative in the corporate work plan at present, which has been somewhat delayed due to a vacancy.
Does that answer your question?
Sure.
Not sure where my little list went. Here, viewers, speak. Anyway, I'm just going to do it by hands, so it's easier. Does anybody have any other questions about attachment A or about what we're doing? Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm fine with the recommendations that are in front of us on page 1 of the report. The question I had is policy 036, which is the director's remuneration review. We need to have a discussion about scope and potential terms of reference for that and sort of what scale of a review we want to do. I don't think it's something that we should try and hash out as 4 of us. I do have a recommendation to refer it to a September 2025 Committee of the Whole for discussion. I just don't know whether that would be in order right now or after we do the other recommendations. So maybe I'll leave it for the moment, but flag it.
So yeah, that's flagged. Let's see where else we go. And then when we're ready, you can add a motion and we'll go through that. Any other comments like that, Director McMahon?
I just had a comment when I was reading through the director email management policy. I think it would be a good idea, whether we handle it as a board or ask staff to help us, to just give ourselves a refresher periodically on the management of our emails, because we don't look at this policy much, and we sometimes don't think about how we're going about our record keeping. So maybe for a discussion at lunchtime, one of these days, we could have a discussion about managing emails with particular attention to, again, we've got an upcoming election in a year and a half, and making sure that we leave our term neat and tidy.
I like that ambition. And anything else popping out for discussion? So seeing no other questions, Director Toth, are you ready to present a motion for the compensation review or recommendation?
Sure. I move that that the board policy, I don't have the exact number, but it's 036, Director's Remuneration Review, be referred to a September 2025 Committee of the Whole for a discussion about potential scope and terms of reference.
I'm just going to direct a question to staff. Is that a reasonable timeline? And I'm getting a nod of approval. That's been seconded. I see no further comments or questions. All those in favor? And that passes. So we do have some recommendations before us, that the board policies be reviewed accordance, which we've done. And there's the separate item about board policy contacting SCRD solicitors, which the report alludes to, as well as director email management that's going to be approved, and how that works. That's also been alluded to. Are we comfortable to move that? I see a mover, seconder, Director McMahon. Any further comments? Good. Seeing none, all those in favor, and that passes. So the next item is 4.2, which is the outstanding directives pertaining to policy. We have a recommendation, 4.2. I don't have the page number in front of me. Is there any questions or comments, or does staff want to add anything to this?
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the intention with this report is to have the Policy Review Committee decide whether or not they want to affirm these directives, and if they are affirmed, they will be added to the corporate work plan for prioritization. So these are directives for policies that have not yet been drafted.
Director McMahon.
Yeah, I have questions about most of these. So there is a volunteer recognition item on our work plan that's been there for donkey's years. So how is that different from this directive, volunteer recognition?
Staff, when you're ready.
Thank you for the question. I think staff would see those two items as related. So perhaps we could add a note to include policy in terms of reviewing volunteer recognition to make it more explicit on the corporate work plan.
Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually coming into this from a little bit different perspective in that we have a work plan item to develop a program for recognizing volunteers. You know, do we need a policy for it, or is the program going to be enough? I mean, we can legislate ourselves into a bureaucratic nightmare. When I looked at this list, I'm actually coming at it from the perspective of let's abandon everything on this list except the dogs in park policy. It's actually the only one I'm interested in seeing move forward. I think the rest of it's otherwise covered off.
Director McMahon.
Yeah. What would be the difference between a policy and a program? Like, I'm not always 100% clear because just volunteer recognition policy, does that mean that we have a policy that we shall recognize our volunteers? That could be a short policy. Yeah.
Staff, would you like to respond?
It may come in many different forms for the different types of volunteers that we have. So I'm going to just give a few examples. And one would be for Dakota Ridge, the board made a decision to pay when there was a budget approval. So it's not necessarily a policy decision, but it's, that would be constitute, in my observation, you're starting to develop a program for Dakota Ridge volunteers. It's not documented and formalized policy. You have also made the same type of decision for your volunteer firefighters, but that may have some operational policies, but perhaps not a board policy. So a program, that's what a program would be, is that you wouldn't formally have a program that would dictate how you treat all of your volunteers, because we have very diverse volunteers, anyway, from advisory committees to whatnot. So I think that's why historically it's been used as a program. I think acknowledging that we have a very diverse volunteer groups within that we interface with the organization. So there's not a one-size-fits-all policy, and that's why we want to take an approach to it from a program perspective.
Does that clarify?
I think, as far as I'm concerned, that we could abandon that, and then if in the development of the volunteer recognition program, it was found that we needed some policy work, then we could come back around at it. But for right now, I think we could abandon that one. The next one I wanted to discuss a little bit was the policy for the conversion of independent community water systems. And the point in here that caught my attention was the analysis of whether each request to join the system is better to join the regional water system or to form a separate service function. And that, I think, is really important because we're living with the results of some past decisions that I think were not good decisions. But this might be broader than just water systems. I'm not quite sure whether, well, it might not apply to sewer systems, but I think this motion as it is drafted is a little too specific. It covers off stuff that's not relevant anymore, but that key issue is still an important issue, is how we set up our services.
So, staff, would you like to respond? And I might add something as well.
Very briefly, Chair, that would be in the feasibility side. There should be options on the structure of a service provision. So we're undergoing that with both Hopkins and New Brighton right now, where one of the options could be to join an already established service, and another option might be to create a local service area. So those are decisions of the board, and the feasibility would outline pros and cons to those.
So just so I'm clear, and then I'll add you in it, that it really does depend on the specific request at the time, rather than an overall policy that says one or the other. But anyway, go ahead.
And yet, the overall policy for regional districts is user pay. And so we've ended up with some services where it's not a user pay service. And that's problematic. So do we affirm that we believe in the user pay model?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand why this policy is, you're looking at it through that particular lens, given that the options for each application would be how does a user pay, rather than whether or not it's a user pay, if I understood the issue.
We've got water systems that are physically unconnected from the regional water system that are part of the regional water system. And that, to me, makes no sense at all. And we're now stuck with them because I don't know how we could ever possibly get rid of them and reestablish them as independent water systems. And it's more than just the user pay, it's also the bookkeeping. Like, we cannot track if they're independent.
That's just fine with me. I'm just going to go to Director Bax. He hasn't had a chance to speak to this, and then I'll go to Director Toth. Director Bax, sorry, I didn't see you.
That's fine. So my understanding of attachment A is that these policy directives have been created for and have been on the books for some time without being concreted and put into our board policy. And so there hasn't been any real action on them. Is that my understanding? Okay. And so that there are certain issues within this policy review that will come up again or are current, but these policy directives are stale. And I think that for housekeeping's sake, that if we get rid of them, and then should we want to bring up a new, more current policy that reflects today, then that's the prerogative of the board. But the exercise that we have in front of us today, I think, is to sweep some of these stale policies out of the book. Is that correct?
I think that's what we're trying to accomplish here.
Although Director Toth has an interest in the dogs and parks policy, I think that I would like to move that we dispose of these policies that are on attachment A and come back to them fresh as need be.
I'm not seeing a seconder on that one. So why don't we continue the conversation a little bit longer and then come back to it. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I guess my problem with this policy is that this policy supposedly to be drafted covers the conversion of independent water systems. It also covers the extension of regional water system into other places. It also covers the economics of water systems and whether they should join regional or their own function. I don't even know what the Egmont water system part of the resolution is supposed to be addressing. I guess it's just left over. But, from that perspective, I think this reads like it's trying to be a policy to do everything to do with water. And I think it's overreaching and unnecessary. I don't disagree with Director McMahon at all. I think, we need to have a discussion about these little systems and, in terms of being stuck with them as part of the regional service, not at all. We could undertake a service review tomorrow and jettison some of these or spin them off into their own separate services with participant approval. And, there's a legislative process for it. And so I don't know whether, like, any policy that we develop can't really be applied retroactively. We'd only be looking at what comes to us in the future and thinking about what's coming at us so far. There might be a handful of individual water systems still on the coast that aren't under SCRD control in some manner. Well, but we also don't know what we don't know, right? So anyways, those are my comments. Thanks.
Director McMahon, any additional comments?
I'm not disagreeing that these directives are somewhat still. I'm just wondering if the intent of several of them is already being captured by something else we're doing right now, in which case we can consider them done, or whether there's a missing piece that we should have considered. And yeah.
So I'm just wondering if this one is abandoned, that you feel that there's enough captured in other activities that we do have running, that this can be abandoned, or would you like to provide an extra level of direction at a different time to make sure that that aspect is covered? Or
would it be helpful for us to have some policy in place before we deal with Hopkins and with, Dreamland Estates? So that we have some direction before we are dealing with each one of these on a case-by-case basis. I guess that's kind of my question is what is the appropriate way forward here?
yeah, that's sort of what I'm thinking, that, are we going to hold back on all this stuff until we actually get a policy that could be the situation may not apply in the end. We may have a specific scenario that isn't covered by the policy in the end. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I think, fundamentally what the conversation on whether we jettison this policy or not, we're getting hung up on is specifically the economics of whether the system should be integrated or standalone.
Yep.
Right. The rest of it, I think we can agree is done. And so I wonder if it's worth a discussion with CAO or infrastructure staff offline about the best way to capture our concerns for future boards.
Yep.
Because it might be that the board in 2012 was trying to capture a specific concern here.
Yeah, that's what it sounds
like. But we don't have the right information to know what they were trying to capture. And I think it's important that if we want to ensure that future analysis of these water systems considers whether they should be rolled into regional or kept standalone, I think there's got to be a different way that we can flag it for future generations. Thanks.
So is that something we can go forward with, Director McMahon?
As long as we do something to flag the issue, I'm fine. Okay. I just don't think we should leave that issue alone because we're trying not to kick problems down the road for future boards. And I'm just going to say about dogs in parks, is that within the scope of the park service review or not?
Staff, would you like to respond?
I think that I appreciate the staff service or the park service review has not been shared. Staff are drafting the scope of work and it's in preparation for issuance. What I know at a high level is there will be a public engagement portion. And so if there are concerns related to certain type of park use, that would be in scope of the park service review. Whether or not it's this particular item being asked, I don't know if it's going to be that prescriptive yet, but most certainly it could be contemplated as part of the park service review if the, committee wanted to direct that back.
Yeah, so my question on this subject is that is there no policy or around dogs in parks at the moment?
There's certainly regulations.
Regulations, and how does a regulation differ from a policy?
Staff, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. So within the context of bylaw enforcement, we have a animal control bylaw. It would be more things like dogs being on leash, and then we do have established dog parks for dogs being off leash. And I don't think it goes beyond that. And the intention of this, I'm not positive of whether it's to, say, have something regulatory that bans dogs from certain parks. I know in the past there have been some conflict between field users, for example, and people running dogs on sports fields. So that could be one potential area where there may be conflict, but there's nothing regulating that.
Director Toth, what was the angle you were looking at for the dogs?
Thanks, Chair. I guess from my perspective, and it's interesting because now that I'm rereading it again, I see and further that policy options for consideration include seaboard minutes, which we don't have. So the resolution is actually incomplete in our agenda package. But I was thinking of it from a perspective of, we've got sports field strategy being undertaken right now, coast-wide. We've got, I know the District of Sechelt continues to struggle with, parks on our, dogs on our park fields. And so from that perspective, I'm seeing it as sort of a timely and germane issue. Without the rest of the context, though, it could be that it's also redundant. So I don't really much care either way. I just felt that it was more germane and relevant than the rest of them that we're looking at today.
So I'm just going to jump in here. Being a dog owner that comes up against the regulations frequently when I'm in Gibson's or on our parks, if we could, my concern with this one, apart from it not the circular reference or lack of reference, is the bandwidth it may require, because I know historically, and there's been documentaries about it, as soon as you mention dogs, it brings up a huge explosion of very extreme polarizing views, which could take on a life of their own. So my preference is to let this sit within the parks review, because I think it always will be simmering in the background. It's never a time when dogs in parks and trails are ever not being contemplated. So that was the reason I didn't think we needed to move forward on it. But so I see no other questions and comments about what's listed here. Is anybody ready to move a motion, or would they like to amend a motion? Oh, I thought there was. I just can't see it. Did we? We didn't second it. No, we didn't.
No.
We didn't.
Motion did not get seconded.
No.
Can I go back to the process here?
Yep. Go back to the process.
Where we're struggling here is we're stuck between affirm and abandon.
Yeah.
And we're not ready, I don't think, to affirm any of these, but we're not quite ready to abandon them either. We're looking for that middle ground where we just want to flag that there is an issue that might require some consideration. So this is probably why some of these are still on the books. I mean, I could abandon the volunteer recognition right now. That one's easy, but there were a couple issues raised.
I was hoping that we could abandon all of them and then go to a couple specific motions for further action on
Process.
other, where we go from there.
Okay.
Director Toth and then Director Bax. Sorry, I look in that direction.
Thank you, Chair. Director Bax sitting way over there all by himself. Just from a process perspective, I'm wondering if staff would have any suggestions on when we were going through the resolutions that are on the books, right, the 600 of them initially, I imagine there were probably a number of them that were open-ended without expiration. And so when we talk about the water system one, I'm wondering if we could make a recommendation that, SCRD water system acquisitions be considered as a standalone service, or, that options be presented around a standalone service for future acquisitions, and that this resolution be, revisited in 10 years' time. I wonder if something like that would be sufficient to sort of placehold the concern and flag it for staff in the future. And so I just look for some clarity from the corporate officer.
Staff, do you have a response to that kind of way of resolving this?
Well, I think you always want to be careful that you're not boxing yourselves or a future board in. You always want to have the context for each situation. And so policy is helpful in guiding, but it also can be a hindrance when there are certain circumstances. So it's difficult to say one of the next, whether or not making a subsequent motion is going to resolve. In my view, any type of feasibility needs to weigh all of the options, and if they are not weighed, then you have to send it back for reconsideration or evaluation. And each board needs to weigh those pros and cons. And like it's been mentioned, we don't know all the context that might have been part of this past resolution. It might have made sense back then. And so you don't know what's going to make sense going forward either. So I think in the spirit of it does it make sense for right now is what you have in front of you. And going forward, each decision is going to have to be based on its own merit. So I don't know if all cases a policy is the recipe that's gonna, or gonna solve the issue.
Is that helpful? Think about. I'm going to go to Director Bax and then I'll go to Director McMahon.
Yeah, so in 10 years, we're going to get a C board minutes footnote, and the board in 10 years is going to go, what does this mean? So I'm going to take another stab at it. Report 4.2, outstanding directives pertaining to policy, has a recommendation number 3, and that, there's a new, you put a new one in, didn't you? Sorry, I'm talking about recommendations number 3, 4.2. There was only 2 possible choices in the recommendation, but now there's a third possible choice. Page 154. Page, I'm looking at, now it's gone. I had a, yes, perhaps we'll take a 5-minute break.
I can't see any recommendations for that.
So nobody heard you say that, but you should turn your microphone on and say we'll take this.
We're taking a break now. Thank you. We're going to get back to 4.2, outstanding directives pertaining to policy. Directors, how would you like to move forward with this? Director Bax.
Certainly. So my thinking is that all these policies are things that have come up in the past. We've created policy for them, but nothing has moved forward on them. But they still are issues that we as a board will deal with should they come up back to us again. And so at this point, I believe that these policies should be abandoned as they stand. It's going to give us the most amount of flexibility in the future. And I think it's going to streamline our policy book just a little bit. And so my motion is to abandon the policies as they're listed in section 4.1 or appendix, is it attachment A, 4.2 attachment A. Is that clear?
I just need to clarify, you're talking abandoning policies. These are abandoning directives. So
And abandoning directives to create policy.
yes, that's correct. Do I have a seconder? Yes, I do. A seconder and Director Todd. And speaking to the motion, Director McMahon.
I guess I will reluctantly support this. I think there are some issues that are raised here that I would not want to lose sight of, but at the same time, the directives are worded in such a way that they were not really actionable. So we're going to have to, come at this from a different direction.
One more thing, Director Bax.
I think with the parks review and our ongoing struggle with the water supply and dealing with the volunteers one-on-one, that most of these things will come to us again and we will deal with them as a board. And so I don't feel that abandoning them is a real big issue.
Any other comments? And I'll call a vote. I don't see anybody. All those in favor? Thank you. That passes. Is there any other motions you're thinking of? Okay, we'll just leave it as is. We're going to number 5, communications. There's no new communications, no new business. We have no in-camera. And so I would like a motion to adjourn the meeting. And that's moved, seconded. All those in favor? That passes. Thank you.